Can you beat Batman Arkham Origins without takedowns? After attempting this challenge with both Asylum and City, I've now continued on to Arkham Origins. Batman depends on takedowns to quickly or silently subdue thugs, cops, and supervillains. What happens when you suddenly take away his ability to use them? Will the Dark Knight still be able to defeat all 8 assassins, stop the Joker, and regain control of Blackgate, all without using a single takedown? The rules are simple. I am at no point in the story allowed to use a takedown. If the use of a takedown is mandatory to continue on with the story, I must add it to the takedown counter. Well, what counts as a takedown? Any attack with the word takedown in its title. Also, I am well aware that Arkham Origins calls pretty much anything and everything a takedown in the battle summary after you finish a Predator map. Seeing as this is extremely unfair and is the only point where certain attacks are actually categorized as takedowns, I've decided to ignore this summary completely. Only attacks categorized as takedowns in either a prompt or the skill tree actually count as takedowns. Now that that's out of the way, let's find out if you can beat Batman Arkham Origins without using takedowns. We start off the game at Blackgate. This section of the game consists of chasing down Black Mask, but never being able to catch up to him due to these thugs constantly getting in our way. These combat fights act as more of a tutorial, meaning we can get by them quite easily without using takedowns. Once we get up to the roof of Blackgate, we run into the very first of Black Mask's assassins. The Killer Croc boss fight involves cape stunning, punching, button mashing, and repeat, so no takedowns necessary, and that's the end of Blackgate for a while. We then go back to the Batcave, learn about Black Mask's 8 assassins, and use our Batwing auto-nav system. The auto-nav system is jammed, so we must go down to the control tower and check it out. This is where I ran into the very first challenge this run had to offer, the tutorial stealth mission. There's a total of 4 armed thugs in this room, and 2 of which are hostage takers. If you watched my Arkham City run, you already know that these types of rooms really want you to use takedowns. In fact, they go to great lengths to keep you from using anything but takedowns. The use of punches, cape stuns, and any other attack you can think of is strictly prohibited against hostage takers like this guy. And, as if that's not enough, none of the gadgets Batman starts off with work against this thug either. You can't skip past him either, the vent won't open until after you've taken this thug out. So it seems as if we've already run into an unavoidable takedown almost immediately after starting the run. However, I was fully prepared to take on a roadblock like this. I had a New Game Plus save ready to go. Playing on New Game Plus would give me access to all of Batman's gadgets, not just the base gadgets. I already know that the Disruptor works against hostage takers, so I could just disable their weapons and attack freely. So I booted up my New Game Plus save and got to this point. I was ready to pull out the Disruptor and use it against the hostage taker, but as you can see, things didn't go as planned. For some reason, the Disruptor is completely missing from Batman's arsenal. I have absolutely no idea why WB decided to entirely remove the Disruptor from Batman's belt during this tutorial. Do you know what this means though? WB seems to have followed the exact same do's and don'ts that Rocksteady implemented into the Arkham City tutorial stealth mission. No attacks allowed other than takedowns, almost none of the gadgets work, and the Disruptor ammo, or in this case the Disruptor entirely, is completely removed from Batman's arsenal. In my Arkham City run, there was one oddball gadget that was actually effective against the hostage taker. That gadget was the Sonic Shock Batarang. So, in theory, that same gadget would also work here. The only problem was unlocking the Sonic Shock Batarang. In order to use this gadget, you first have to unlock it by achieving rank 10 in the Dark Knight challenges. Easier said than done. Since I'm an idiot and didn't think to unlock the Sonic Shock Batarang, that meant I was going to have to play through normal mode again. Did that sound like I meant just once? Well, no, I had to play through the story a total of 5 times before I finally unlocked the gadget, which added up to about 15 hours of gameplay. All just to get this one gadget and eliminate a takedown. You may be wondering why on earth it took me 5 playthroughs to get rank 10 in the Dark Knight challenges. Well, to my knowledge, the Dark Knight challenges are meant to be completed throughout normal mode, New Game Plus, and I Am the Knight. Since I was trying to do 2/3 of the Dark Knight Predator challenges in just normal mode, this proved to be nearly impossible. I had to plan out every Predator room and how I would get through each individual stage of the Dark Knight challenges. Since there are a very limited amount of Predator rooms in Origins, I had to get through at least one stage in almost every single Predator encounter I faced. Now that might seem easy to you, but given how bugged the Dark Knight challenge system seemed to be, this was more difficult than you probably think. More than a few times I would clearly complete a stage, but the buggy game refused to accept the fact that I had finished the challenge, and there was no restarting or redoing the Predator map, since the game would save immediately after you finish. This meant that I would no longer have enough Predator maps ahead to achieve rank 10, resulting in me having to restart the game entirely and try again. On my 5th playthrough, all the stars aligned and I was barely able to get to rank 10 and unlock the Sonic Batarang. I could make an entire video on this topic, but I hope you can do with that summary, even though it doesn't do all my time, dedication, and struggles justice. About 2 weeks later, I was finally able to get to this area with the Sonic Batarang unlocked. Luckily, the Sonic Shock Batarang was the only non-base gadget in my arsenal. All the other gadgets I unlocked during my normal run were missing. This was the moment of truth. Would the Sonic Shock Batarang take out the hostage taker and prove my theory right? Or was all my time and dedication towards unlocking this gadget a complete waste of time? Well, let me tell you. The Sonic Shock Batarang does work against the hostage taker. However, right before you shock him unconscious, he gets a shot off. This shot kills the hostage, and you have to restart. So in other words, the hours and hours I spent trying to unlock this gadget were completely in vain. Or were they? Maybe it wouldn't work in the way I imagined it would, but the gadget might still prove useful. If you hold off on dropping smoke in this position, the enemies will open fire on you. As soon as they open fire, the game gives you the ability to move around. You can also use the remote batarang in this position, but none of the other base gadgets work. Since the remote batarang does no damage and only knocks down these enemies for a brief time, I dismissed this strategy entirely. Now that I had the Sonic Shock Batarang though, things might go differently. Thankfully, the Sonic Shock Batarang is one of the few gadgets that does work in this position, meaning you can take out one of these two thugs shooting at you. I dropped the smoke bomb and grappled up. The one remaining thug that had been shooting at me ran to get into his position. I was then forced to use one inverted takedown on this hostage taker, then move on. Normally you're supposed to vent take down the second enemy, but I was able to just open up the vent and beat down him. Now here's where that Sonic Batarang I used earlier came into play. This hostage taker separated by a weak wall would normally be an unavoidable takedown. I can't punch the wall, nor explode it since that would harm the hostage. And Batman won't let me do anything that could harm the hostage, making this wall seemingly impossible to get through without using a takedown. Since I took that thug out earlier with the Sonic Shock Batarang, there is now no hostage taker in this position. I was able to use my explosive gel to open up the wall, and it seems as if I was able to avoid using a takedown here. But now we have another problem on our hands. I can't get over this little ledge. I tried climbing over it, as well as diving over it, but neither of those worked. My guess is that WB never accounted for someone like me to find a way to open up this wall using explosive gel instead of a takedown. So, even though it's clearly open, the game hasn't registered that I opened this wall because I haven't used a takedown yet. I was not about to give up though. What if I was able to take out both thugs in this position instead of just one? This would mean that the fight would end as soon as I take out this enemy, which would reset the game. Then I should be able to climb over the ledge without issue. The only problem is finding a way to knock the second thug out. After I take out this first thug with the Sonic Batarang, I can do 3 things. Use my smoke bomb, use the remote batarang, and move around this little platform. None of which help me knock out this thug. The only way to gain access to unrestricted movement is to grapple up to this gargoyle and listen to Batman's long dialogue sequence. This gives the thug plenty of time to run away, even after knocking him down with a remote batarang and throwing smoke at him. So, to my knowledge, there is no way to take both of these enemies out before they get into position. My next strategy was just an attempt at changing up some variables. I had absolutely no reason to believe this would somehow work, but what if I were to leave this second thug conscious instead of knocking him out? So, instead of using a beatdown on this enemy, I ultra keep stunned him and left him there. I then attempted to get over this wall after using the explosive gel, and it actually worked! For some reason, leaving this thug alive allowed me to climb over this ledge and avoid a seemingly required takedown. I have no idea how or why this worked. Arkham Origins coding is truly a mystery. Now all that's left in the room is this one last thug, who was easily taken out with a beatdown. So I was able to make it through this section after using one takedown on this hostage taker. I'm proud to say that I found a way to avoid using a takedown in an area that was coded to force the player to use a takedown. I would have liked to have found a way to avoid using an inverted takedown here as well, but I don't think that's possible. So we have to add one takedown to the takedown counter. Finally, moving on with the story, we have to track down Penguin and interrogate him. Tracking down Penguin wasn't that bad. The few combat encounters were fairly easy. There was one predator encounter, but it was just 3 enemies, so nothing difficult at all. This was also where I noticed that I still didn't have any of my gadgets that I unlocked through normal mode, and I remembered that those don't carry over to New Game Plus and Origins. This will make my run a lot more difficult moving forward. Once we track down Penguin, we head to his ship to interrogate him. To get to Penguin though, we first have to get inside the ship, where multiple armed thugs are guarding the door. I simply used a beatdown on both snipers, and to my surprise, it didn't alert any of the other thugs. I was able to take out the remaining enemies by pulling them over the ledges with the back claw, and now we can head into the ship. Nothing noteworthy really happened in the ship at first, just a few basic enemies scattered around here and there. But then I started running into some rather large combat encounters. Since I'm on New Game Plus, there were a lot of different enemy types that normally wouldn't be introduced until much later into the story. These thugs also don't have the counter icons above their heads, making combat more difficult than normal. Even with these added difficulties though, I was able to get past these combat encounters without much trouble because I have a lot of experience with the Arkham combat. Now look, I'm not saying I flawlessly bypassed these combat encounters with ease. I did make some mistakes, but I could afford to since I had maxed out armor. I also ran into the first real predator encounter along the way, but it wasn't difficult at all. I simply camped on this little structure and pulled each and every single enemy over the ledges with the back claw. We can then finally get to the Penguin, interrogate him, and Deathstroke. I can't use the special combo takedown on Deathstroke, nor do the counter icons show up above his head. This may sound challenging at first, but it wasn't. The special combo takedown is far from required, resulting in a little damage that can easily be made up through punching. And I'm pretty good at timing the counters out against Deathstroke, so I was able to defeat him with ease, without taking any damage at that. After defeating Deathstroke, we gain access to the remote claw, which is going to make Predator a lot easier down the line. In the next section of the game, we have to infiltrate the GCPD and solve the Lacey Towers case. But first we have to get inside the GCPD, where there are multiple police officers, including snipers, on guard. I simply used a beatdown on both snipers to take them out. Many punches later, I had knocked out the remaining thugs, and I was able to continue on with the story. Now that I'm inside the GCPD, let's talk about this area as a whole. If I'm being honest, the combat wasn't that hard. Like I said earlier, I'm pretty good at combat and have max armor, so these officers stood no chance. There was also a Predator map in this section. The remote claw is an extremely helpful tool in Predator, being able to take out up to 3 enemies using the gargoyles, and then some more if you use the propane tanks. But it didn't solve all the problems Predator rooms threw at me. The main one being that the remote claw can't string armored thugs onto gargoyles. So my strategy was to try and take out most of the regular thugs using the remote claw, then either beat down or black claw the remaining armored enemies, which seemed to work okay. Outside of Predator in combat, there were 2 areas that I want to discuss. The first of which being this area where the cop is interrogating Loose Lips. I didn't know this, but you can just dive through the window and take out the cop normally instead of using a takedown, so no need to use a takedown there. The second area I want to mention is in the GCPD sewers. I just thought that I should say here that I don't count this move as a takedown. Although it sure looks like a takedown, it's not on the skill tree or a prompt, so it's not a takedown. So we can get through the GCPD section of the game without using any takedowns. Now that we've solved the Lacey Towers case and discovered the Joker, we now make our way to the bank. After confronting the Joker, we're faced with another Predator map. I just picked off each enemy one by one with my gadgets until they were all taken out. After we finish that Predator map, we have to head over to the Steel Mill. Again, some more combat and Predator, but I've got the hang of both of those by now. Even though my gadgets are kind of limited on these outside Predator maps, I've found an effective strategy to take these enemies out. Simply camp the ladders and place explosive gel to knock every enemy off that tries to climb up. It's an instant knockout, and alerts everyone else to his position, meaning you can repeat the same strategy over and over again. At the end of the Steel Mill section, we have the Copperhead boss fight. This boss was so annoying. It's already extremely difficult to judge when she's going to attack, and take away her counter icons, it's just that much more difficult. Now take away blade dodge takedowns and special combo takedowns, adding to the already difficult challenge ahead. Thanks to my maxed out armor again, I was still able to survive with a good amount of health left despite my poor gameplay. And that's the end of the Steel Mill. Now we have to track down Joker at the hotel. Gameplay wise, the hotel section of the game was pretty difficult. The enemies seemed to be getting stronger, quicker, and smarter in both combat and Predator. Not to mention the obvious increase of these enemies as well. Regardless, I was able to make it through both combat and Predator with little to no issue. One Predator map I was really worried about was this encounter. Bane's men will arm proximity mines in the gargoyles after you take out a few thugs. That means I can't use the gargoyles or takedowns. Practically flawless gameplay resulted in me getting through this section on my first try, even though I kinda just winged it. I'll probably post this entire Predator encounter on my Shorts channel because it was just that good. Yes, I do have a second channel called Arkham Nerd Shorts where I post clips, you should check it out. So moving on, I was able to make it all the way up to the top of the hotel without using any takedowns. Then I ran into Bane. Or more accurately, Bane ran into me. The first stage of this boss fight is easy. Bane doesn't have his Venom active, so I can just repeatedly beat down him to do damage. The second stage poses much more of a threat because Bane activates his Venom. In his Venom state, Bane takes 0 damage from any attack, and the only way to deactivate his Venom is to use the special combo Takedown. Or so it seems. After 3 beatdowns on Bane, you'll have charged up your shock gloves fully. While Batman's shock gloves are active, he'll finish his beatdowns by deactivating Bane's Venom instead of kicking him in the face. That means that we can cut off Bane from his Venom, get him back to his normal state, and start dealing damage again without using any takedowns. The third and final stage of this boss fight is basically the second stage, just much harder. Bane now has a few different attacks and mechanics in his arsenal, and now there are also multiple thugs attacking me. I simply had to charge up and use my shock gloves to cut off Bane from his Venom, then I was able to attack and deal damage freely. So I was able to make it past Bane and the entire hotel section of the game without using a single takedown. The next big section of the game is Firefly's sequence. Combat I've already gone over a lot. Punching, countering, and beatdowns were effective enough to get by any encounters without using takedowns. I've also gone over Predator a lot throughout this video, but I want to go over it one last time since I now have most of my gadgets available. I usually use my remote claw ammo to instantly knock out 3 enemies. Then I use my sonic shock battering and maybe backclaw 1 or 2 enemies over the ledges. Then I disrupt the remaining enemies' weapons and punch them unconscious. And that's how I dealt with Predator maps without using takedowns now that I had access to all my gadgets. The Firefly boss fight itself was honestly extremely easy and has nothing to do with takedowns in the slightest, so I was able to disarm the bombs and defeat Firefly without using any takedowns. The last and most difficult section of the game, we head back to Blackgate to stop the riot. Once we get into Blackgate, we run into this Predator map. Using the exact same strategy I used in the Firefly section, as well as using a little bit of my ladder camping strategy, I got through this section with ease. Now that the last Predator encounter of the game was taken care of, let's move on to finding the Joker. The next few areas this game had in store for me were combat sections. Remember how I said earlier I was getting the hang of combat? Well, I was going absolutely nuts, flawlessing a majority of these combat sections, including this giant encounter with a crazy amount of enemies. After we get through the combat fights, we get to this area. Joker and Bane have teamed up to try and make Batman break his moral code. That means we have to fight Bane and, well, stop his heart before the electric chair fully charges. The first stage of this fight is, for the most part, a copy-paste from the hotel boss fight with Bane, but does have a few noticeable differences to it. For starters, Bane doesn't have a venom state at this stage. However, even though Bane's venom isn't active, the only way I can deal damage to him is by using this attack. So that means I had to wait for my shock gloves to charge up and then use a beatdown in order to deal any damage to Bane. The second stage was much easier, mainly because the shock gloves are always active no matter what. So after I finished the first and second stages, Bane decides it's a good idea to inject himself with a compound even more powerful than Venom. So now we have to defeat TN1 Bane. This absolute monster of a man is ridiculously powerful, so much so that the game wants the player to stay out of sight, sneak up on Bane, and use takedowns to get in damage. I've already learned that playing the game the wrong way is not a good idea, but I tried it out anyway. I went into a full-out brawl with TN1 Bane. If you try punching Bane, he'll counter and punch you instead, so no non-takedown attacks work. What about gadgets? Well, Bane completely ignores most of Batman's gadgets, and they just bounce off of him as if they were toys. There are also a few gadgets that Bane can actually counter as well. Say you try using the Bat Claw, Bane will pull you in and then slam you. So after getting punched around like a dummy for a good 20 minutes, I discovered that the only way to damage TN1 Bane is to, sadly, use takedowns. Don't get too discouraged though, because I still have control over how many takedowns I use. After some more experimenting, I found out that it takes a total of 9 takedowns to beat TN1 Bane. However, we can lower that number by using the electric walls. Now, slamming Bane into the electric wall does count as another takedown, but in the end it yields more damage. So we're essentially getting the damage of 3 takedowns for the price of 2. That means that we can beat TN1 Bane using just 6 takedowns with this strategy. But I'm not done yet. Turns out there's a few vents and grates that are positioned in the perfect spot to automatically launch Bane into the electric wall. We never got a second takedown prompt, so therefore Batman slamming Bane into the electric wall was technically part of the original takedown we used. That means that we can use the electric walls without using a second takedown. Lots of manipulation later, I was able to use these silent takedowns from the grates to push Bane into the electric walls. After doing this 3 times, Bane was defeated. So I was able to lower the amount of takedowns needed to just 3. Now we can continue on with the story after adding 3 more takedowns to the takedown counter. That may sound like a lot, but I was going into this boss fight thinking I was going to need many more takedowns than that. So beating Bane using just 3 takedowns made me feel very accomplished. Now all that's left to do is defeat a few more thugs with Gordon, beat up Joker in the chapel, and then the run's over. That means that I was able to beat Batman Arkham Origins using a total of just 4 takedowns. Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more Batman Arkham content, and stay tuned for Batman Arkham Knight without takedowns next time.